Karol Kot was a pretty normal kid growing up in Poland, with a normal life and a normal family. But one summer holiday, his family took a trip down south, where Karol would stumble upon the local slaughterhouse. Seeing the graphic deaths of animals firsthand, he became fascinated with blood and the concept of death. He also began to collect knives, which he would use to torture his sister's cats and kill several small animals. It wasn't long before his obsession with death compelled him to act out his fantasies. Welcome to History's Biggest Villains. Karol Kot was born on December 18, 1946 in Krakow, Poland. His father was an engineer for the army and his mother was an activist for the League of Women. Karol's parents came from well-educated families and provided their son with a good life. From an early age, though, Karol exhibited disturbing tastes. During summer trips, he enjoyed visiting a local slaughterhouse to see the animals being killed. He often helped to kill the calves and had a bizarre habit of drinking the warm blood of the freshly killed animals. Sometimes he would stop his mother from killing fish, only to poke their eyes out and lick the blood off them. He also began to collect knives, an obsession that his parents financially supported. Academically, Kot had no problems at school, although he remained isolated from other students for his strange personality. Karol's first attack took place in September 1964. 48-year-old Helene Velgen was visiting a church in Krakow when she saw Karol deep in prayer. When she also knelt down to pray, he pulled out a knife concealed in his jacket and stabbed her in the back, aiming for her heart. Kot hurried out of the church, and when he was a safe distance away, he stopped to lick the blood from the knife. Although she was seriously injured and in severe shock, the attack was non-fatal. She managed to remember that her attacker had a red shield stitched to his jacket, indicating to the police that he was a high school student. A few days later, Kot lay in wait for his next victim at a tram stop. He set his sights on 73-year-old Franziska Lewandowska, who had left the tram and was walking home. Kot followed her, and when she reached the steps leading up to her front door, he pulled out a knife and stabbed her in the back. The attack caused her to stumble and fall down the stairs. Feeling confident that he had killed her, Karol quickly left the scene. The woman survived, but never regained her full health. The fall broke her spine and left her paralyzed from the waist down. On September 29, 1964, Kot decided to attack again. He was walking around town when he saw 86-year-old Maria Plicha go into a church. As with his previous victims, he stabbed her in the back. However, this time his attack was fatal. Before she died, the victim managed to whisper to a nun that her attacker was a young man. Karol's criminal activity slowed down for 17 months after this. During a trip to Tyniec in 1965, he attempted to murder his friend Danuta by putting a knife to her throat. Danuta laughed at Karol before calmly explaining that if he killed her, he would be the main suspect immediately. Early in 1966, Kot began experimenting with poisons in order to claim more victims. At a bar, he poured arsenic into a bottle of vinegar and then left. He then monitored the newspapers to find any mentions of poisoning, but he was unsuccessful. He often left bottles of beer and soda poisoned with arsenic out in the open in public, but no one ever drank them, because who drinks a random soda in public? He once poured a large quantity of arsenic into a schoolmate's drink, but the boy noticed a suspicious smell and refused to drink it. Kot also committed several arsons during this time as well. I'm trying to figure out how he got the arsenic in the first place. On Sunday, September 13th, 1966, Kot wanted to kill again and went to the Kaziko Mound area of Krakow. He knew that he would be able to find people walking alone there. An 11-year-old boy named Leszek Kalik was pulling his sled when Kot attacked him. He grabbed him by the neck and stabbed him 11 times, killing him. Once again, terror returned to the city as the people feared that the vampire of Krakow had returned. Some residents began sleeping with wooden boards beneath their shirts to protect against knife wounds. After claiming his second victim, Karol was ecstatic and enjoying his criminal success. When the newspapers published a photograph of the young boy he had killed, he was so happy that he ran to his older friend Danuta and boasted that that was his work, announcing that he would make it his bedroom wallpaper. But those closest to him never took him seriously, and his parents never suspected their son could be a killer. Kot later said that he had a secret thrill from sitting at the dinner table while his father snorted in disgust and commented that only a bastard could commit such heinous crimes. It was Danuta whom he could confide in the most, as he referred to her as his girlfriend. But when he revealed to her that he had shards of glass in his pockets with which he planned to cut her and plant on her body to make it look like a suicide, she became concerned. Danuta convinced him to go see a doctor who merely sent him home with some vitamins. Yet Danuta didn't go to the police and report her friend, refusing to take his sadistic tendencies seriously and believing that Kot was just a harmless but troubled young man. But Karol wasn't done. 2 months later, on April 14th, 1966, Kot was sitting on some steps outside an apartment building waiting for his next victim when a 7-year-old girl called Malgosa came downstairs to collect letters from the mailbox. Kot grabbed her and stabbed her 8 times in the stomach, chest, and back. However, people passing by came to her rescue and she survived. The young girl could remember little about her attacker, except he was wearing a white scarf. After the attack, Kot went to a police station to extend his gun license and then returned home to eat dinner. 4 days later, he returned to the scene of the crime, inquiring about the victim's name from her mother. After several attacks, the police were now under enormous pressure to find the culprit. Investigators working the case discovered similarities between the attacks. Based on surviving victim testimony, it was believed that the killer acted alone, chose victims weaker than himself, and attacked quickly, inflicting blows to the abdomen and upper back. In addition, police didn't believe that the motive for the attacks was robbery, as the culprit never spoke to the victims and no items were ever taken from the victims. Despite the fact that investigators were aware that the attacker was a young man, they still couldn't find their suspect. As news of the latest victim spread throughout the city, Danuta now began to suspect that Karol really was the vampire of Krakow. She hesitated for some time, believing that he was innocent. However, his accounts of the attacks were so detailed that she believed it couldn't be the product of a sick imagination and decided to report her suspicions to the police. Shortly after he graduated from school, Kot was arrested on June 1st, 1966. Officers who arrived at Kot's apartment were astonished when they were met at the door by a kind and polite young man. A search of his house revealed 16 knives and an assortment of other weapons that belonged to him. Initially, Kot denied everything, but when confronted with his suspected victims, he confessed, then proudly began talking about his achievements. When in the presence of one of his surviving victims who recognized him, Kot said, "Your memory is good. Come here so I can finish you off." Jesus Christ. He reenacted some of the crimes before investigators, showing them how he held his knife and the way in which he approached his victims, all while grinning for the camera as he held a knife to a young woman assisting with the investigation. After intensive questioning, he was charged with 2 counts of murder, 10 attempted murders, and 4 counts of arson. Numerous expert witnesses were appointed to find the cause of Kot's psychopathic behavior. He discovered that Kot had shown strange inclinations since early childhood. After a series of psychological observations and examinations, the doctors asserted that he was completely sane and could attend the trial with full consequences of his actions. When asked in an interview whether he was aware that murder was a crime and an evil deed, Kot presented his moral standards. According to him, what determines moral appropriateness of human actions is the fact that they bring an individual satisfaction and a sense of fulfilled duty. Therefore, he considered himself a murderer, but not an evil person. What? In his words, evil men were drunkards and those who had sex with prostitutes. He viewed himself as only a murderer. What? Okay. Suffering is beauty, and inflicting pain and suffering on someone is a work of art, he said. Not everyone can do it. Kot wondered if he would soon be released to remove undesirable people as a service to society. Arraigned before the court on May 3rd, 1967, Kot gave a very detailed testimony of his crimes before the court, along with his plans that he had not yet managed to carry out. These plans that he revealed were so extreme that the court had them withheld. Throughout the proceedings, Kot did not display any sign of remorse. On the contrary, he was relaxed and seemed unaware of the possible sentence that he could receive. The trial had aroused great interest amongst the public, who demanded that he receive the death penalty. The most contentious issue presented at the trial was the assessment of his mental state at the time of the murders. Forensic experts from Krakow found Kot to be the classic example of a psychopath, with a deviation from the norms of temperament, drive, and character, coupled with a lack of higher emotionality. They presented to the court that Karol was a limited sanity murderer who could not adapt to social norms. Meanwhile, psychiatrists believed that Kot was aware of the harmful effects of his actions and was to some degree even able to control them. The fact that he was able to refrain from attacking under certain circumstances further supported the theory that he was sane. During visits to the crime scenes and during the court hearings, Kot smiled and looked like a good-natured boy. When weapons or detailed descriptions of his crimes were presented to the court, he visibly smiled and appeared happy. The court upheld the opinion of the psychiatric experts, and on July 14, 1967, they found him guilty of murder, condemning him to death. However, his lawyers filed an appeal to the Supreme Court on November 22nd based on diminished responsibility. The court listened to the testimony of the forensic experts and took his age into account and overturned the death penalty and instead sentenced him to life in prison. However, the general prosecutor of the Polish People's Republic had the right to revise the sentence, and on March 11, 1968, reconvened the Supreme Court. Once again, Kot was sentenced to death by hanging. The judgment of the Supreme Court was based on the murder of the 11-year-old boy and Kot's attempt to kill the 7-year-old girl, stating, taking into account the defenseless beings, his cynicism and lack of remorse, the only right punishment is the death penalty. The sentence was carried out on May 16, 1968, and Karol Kot, the vampire of Krakow, was executed by hanging. He was 21 years old. Like, this case is really crazy because someone so young carrying out such crazy acts, and the fact that he feels like he's such this bad guy when your victims are children and old ladies. Like, that's really a coward, if we're being honest. You see an 11-year-old boy and you're gonna kill him for no reason. You see a 7-year-old girl, you're trying to kill her for no reason other than you want to. Like, there's no legit reason, you just want to kill people. Like, it's just insane. The appropriate sentence was handed down, though, if we're going to be honest. That is the story of the vampire of Krakow. Thanks to everyone for watching this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Thank you for all the support you guys have given this channel so far. I really appreciate it. But thank you so much. Leave a like, hit that subscribe. Be safe, have a great day, stay on the grind. I'm out. Peace.